In this video, we continue our series on the names, faces, and profiles of the 7 majors of the Nigerian Army that planned and executed the January 1966 military coup that took place in Nigeria. Nigeria was barely 6 years old at the time, having gained independence in October 1966. It was an innocent country, and its government was still in its immaculate form until the execution of the first military coup. In this coup, so much blood was shed, and the innocence of the new country was stained, and badly at that. In this video, we direct our focus on one of the 7 majors, Major Timothy Onwatwegu. One of the characteristic features of that coup is the fact that most of the 7 majors were persons who were very close to the victims of the coup. They were persons who had relationships, so to say, with the victims. They were regular visitors to the residences of the victims. For instance, Major Donato Zokafo was the commander of the Federal Guards Brigade, whose responsibility was the provision of security to the first family, Prime Minister Tafawa Balewa's family. Major Humphrey Chukwuka was next to Lieutenant Colonel James Palm, and by military protocols he took orders from Lieutenant Colonel Palm. Major Timothy Onwatwegwu was another close person to one of the victims, Brigadier Samuel Ademulegun. The brigadier was his direct boss, and Timothy was a regular visitor to the house, and even the young children of the brigadier knew him personally and called him Uncle Timothy. Timothy was the one assigned to arrest his boss, dead or alive. It was both difficult and unholy, but Timothy was already in the coup, and he had to accept the assignment. His portion of the coup was in the northern region of Nigeria, where Major Chukwuma Kaduna Nzelgu was the leader. On the fateful night of January 15, 1966, the coup plotters moved to the residencies of their respective targets and stayed around their environments quietly, waiting for the HR, which was scheduled for between 2:40 and 2:45 a.m. Major Timothy Onwatwegu was in the Kaduna residence of his boss, Brigadier Samuel Ademulegun. The guards on duty were either compromised or threatened to give way. Timothy then went in with his men. They headed straight into the brigadier's bedroom. The brigadier was on the bed with his wife, who was a nurse by profession. The wife was about 8 months pregnant. The children were on holidays and were all in the house with the parents. One of the children, their daughter Sholakwe, was in the same bedroom with her parents because a night before she was not feeling fine, and the parents had to allow her stay with them on the same bed. Timothy entered and commanded his boss to rise to his feet. The boss, a brigadier, seeing a major commanding him in such manner, was reluctant, and rather than rise to his feet, he challenged Timothy and his gang. He said, quote, "Timothy, what the hell are you doing in my bedroom?" On a normal day, Timothy will give a salute and explain himself in the most respectful manner to his boss. But this was not a normal day. It was a day to arrest the brigadier, dead or alive, and so Timothy was defiant. He commanded him further, and still the brigadier refused to budge. The brigadier pulled his bedside drawer to bring out his service pistol, but as he made to the drawer, Timothy and his group poured hot bullets into him. The brigadier fell to the ground and died on the spot. The proportionality of the attack was too close, and the intensity was such that no human being would be expected to survive given the same circumstance. It was a horrific day for the army, the family of the brigadier, and the nation of Nigeria at large. The other sad part of the narrative is that the pregnant wife of the brigadier was also shot and killed. Story has it that she knelt down to beg Timothy, who was a regular visitor to the house. Her pleas were not accepted. What she got, sadly, was a rain of bullets on her and her unborn child. She fell to the ground and died on the spot. In reality, 3 lives were lost in one household in less than an hour. It was an inexplicable murder in the bedroom. Words could not explain it. It was horrific and manifestly carried out with no pine of human kindness. The daughter of the Brigadier Sholakwe, who spent the night with her parents, was only 6 years old at the time. She witnessed the murder of her parents, and the shock of this would not leave her for many years. More than 50 years after, she wrote a book with the title The Brigadier's Daughter, and in the book she chronicled the events of that night and how she battled with the shock of the murder of her parents in her very before for many years into her adulthood, and how she navigated the rough ages of life without the guidance of her parents. We consider it imperative to take a few excerpts from the book, which she published in 2021. The book is made up of 7 short chapters. From page 13 of the book, the author narrates as follows, quote, "My father had been out of Kaduna for days on official duty. He had been hinted about the possibility of a bloody coup and could have stayed back and not returned to Kaduna, but he was not one to run away from danger in the line of duty. That could have amounted to cowardice. He returned to his base in Kaduna that day as the clouds thickened with darkness." She continued, still in quote, "My father's favorite meal was pounded yam and okra, or vegetable. The yam pounding mortar and pesto had a proud corner in our kitchen. He loved cow leg. I remember the tiny round bones that came out of the cow leg after he had finished eating it. Born into a Christian family, my father attended the Anglican church, and we did with him, despite the fact that my mother was a Muslim." She went on, still in quote, "December 14, 1965, I turned 6. My friends were invited to our Kaduna residence. We had a party. Little did I know ahead, 32 days thereafter, Saturday, January 15, 1966, the day seemed like every other normal day with the Harmattan army and cold winds. And the night time came. I had contracted chicken pox a few days earlier, so on that night I slept on the same bed with my parents. That was in their bedroom, face painted over with calamine motion. I was fast asleep while my 4-year-old younger brother, the youngest of all 6 children my father had, was asleep in a nearby cot in the same room. History records the time to be between 2 a.m. and 2:40 a.m. For me as a child, it was the dead of the night." She continued, still in quote, "I was awakened by noise. I saw a multitude of soldiers. History lists 14 names of the soldiers that broke into my parents' bedroom. I saw a multitude of soldiers while recognizing the leader of the gang as Major Timothy Onwatwegwu, whom I called Uncle. Him and Major Nzelgu being regular visitors to our home and at our dining table. I recall my first question was, 'Uncle, what are you doing here?' To which I got no response. At this time, my mother, who was pregnant, I have been told was about 8 months pregnant, was on her feet. My father, who was in his white underpants and singlet, was also sitting up on the bed. I heard my father talking to Onwatwegu. He asked, 'Timothy, how did you get into my bedroom? And what the devil do you think you are doing?' This was an appropriate question, judging by the number of guards stationed outside the house. The guards, commanded by Lance Corporal Lawrence Akuma, had either been intimidated or bought over or shot for the men to have gained access. These guards were drawn from 3rd Infantry Battalion of the Nigerian Army. I have been told that my father was the most protected personality in the northern region of Nigeria at the time, being the commander of the 1st Brigade of the Nigerian Army. She went on to say at page 18 of the book, still in quotes, "I was up watching. Perhaps it would not have made sense to a 6-year-old, but the picture of the events of that night have been locked in my heart for over 50 years, fresh and indelible. I sat up and watched the entire event unfold. I was a spectator at the death of my parents. My older brother Bankole, who was 13 years old at the time, was home on holidays from school. He was in the room across the landing upstairs. As soon as he saw the soldiers with their guns, he ran back into his bedroom for safety. The brigadier's daughter continued still at page 18 and still in quote, "My mother probably looked at Onwatwegu as the major that he was, a junior officer, a supposed friend of the family who usually came to eat. Ignoring the danger staring at her, my mother got up and planted her knees boldly in front of her husband, or perhaps she felt that the fact that she was pregnant would make a difference and bring out the humane side of Major Onwatwegu and his men, but it did not. My father opened his bedside drawer in an attempt to bring out his service pistol against the long guns by about 14 soldiers, all pointing at him. He was not ready to give up without a fight or die like a coward. He would rather fight and die gallantly than degrade the honor of his office by surrendering to subordinates. I understand that my father was the most protected personality in the whole of the northern region of Nigeria, my father being the commander of the 1st Brigade of the Nigerian Army. As he made for his service pistol in the drawer, Major Onwatwegu and his men rained bullets into my mother, who was still standing between the soldiers and my father. The bullets went through her. My mother slumped and began to gasp for air while also attempting to talk in pain. A conversation ensued between Onwatwegu and my father. My father was marched out of the bedroom for a couple of minutes and led back in. On getting in, he was shot. The brigadier's daughter went on to say at page 20 of her book, still in quote, "We were there in the same room. It was like a film show. Blood all over. Blood on the floor, streaming on the walls. My mother did not die instantly. She kept calling my brother Kole and our maid Bele, perhaps to tell them what to do with us. But her voice was incoherent as life had slowly left her. Neither my brother nor our maid Bele could come near her body at the time. After what seemed like hours, the soldiers left, leaving 2 lifeless bodies behind." She continued at page 21, still in quote, "By morning, the news had traveled all over. The death of the brigadier and his pregnant wife. My brother Kole had come into the room to move our younger brother and I to the boys' quarters. My father's orderly, whom we knew as Baba Dogu, was at the boys' quarters that morning. Everything seemed quiet as we sat there waiting to wake up from the bad dream. That same morning, the army sent personnel to pack up their bodies in preparation for burial. Both their bodies were packed and taken away in an army Land Rover. We watched the Land Rover take off at a distance at the boys' quarters." End of quote. This is the sad story of the brigadier's daughter, a 6-year-old Nigerian child, Sholakwe Aderinola Abiodun Ademulegun, who was present in her father's bedroom when her father, a brigadier in the Nigerian Army, was shot and killed, along with his wife, Latifat Ademulegun, a nurse who was heavily pregnant at the time, but who was killed by soldiers of the Nigerian Army in the early hours of 15th January 1966. It was tragic and shocking to many. It was unbelievable, but it happened. What was her offense? Nothing, absolutely. She was just the wife of the brigadier. There was nightfall in the family of the late brigadier, and life was never going to be the same again. It was an action taken by a group of young military majors in conjunction with others with a view to taking over the reins of leadership of Nigeria. Some reports say that Major Chukwuma Kaduna Nzegu was the leader of the coup plot, while other reports say that the leader was Major Emmanuel Ifajuna. They recruited other majors and gave them separate assignments on who to kill. The majors and others in the lower rank worked in concert to eliminate the persons that were penciled for the elimination. It was the first ever military coup in Nigeria, and the result was beyond description. The account of Brigadier Ademulegun's daughter is a sad reminder of the event of January 15, 1966. As noted by the Brigadier's daughter, she may not remember exactly everything that happened around her at the age of 6, but the event of January 15, 1966 remains etched in her memory forever. At the time of the making of this video, the Brigadier's daughter is 65 years old, having been born in 1959. She has two daughters, namely Olufunlola Abike and Ibiyinka Anike, both of whom have given the Brigadier's daughter grandchildren. The Brigadier's daughter went on in her narrative, and at page 21, she gave another sad version of the story. She noted thus, in quote, "We were told that our parents were buried at the military burial ground in Kaduna. Sadly, the burial ground has now become a part of an express road in Kaduna. We never knew their burial ground and never ever got the opportunity of visiting their burial spots to place flowers. As of today, the burial spots no more exist." End of quote. One would have thought that following the decision to construct an express road across such a historic cemetery, such as the one that the Ademuleguns were buried, the remains of such persons ought to have been first exhumed and relocated to another burial site, preferably in the place of origin of the late brigadier or in any military cemetery in the country. Ademulegun was from Ondo State in the southwestern region of Nigeria. He was number 3 in the Nigerian Army, while Brigadier Wellington Bassey from Akwa Ibom was number 1. Agui Ronsi from Abia State was number 2. It is our view in the Back-in-History family that the man whose name is written as number 3 in the enrollment record of the Nigerian Army deserved more than a grave without identification on the expressway. It should, however, be noted that according to the Brigadier's daughter, the Nigerian Army took responsibility for the education of the children of the deceased brigadier up to the university level. We commend the Army for this kind gesture. It is our prayer that the Almighty Creator will accept the souls of Brigadier Samuel Ademulegun and that of his wife Latifat Ademulegun, even as we pray for healing and closure for the children and other members of their family. Major Timothy Onwatwegwu was sponsored by the government of Nigeria to study at the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst in the United Kingdom. He received his commission in 1961. He was in the same class with Murtala Mohammed Shua, and Ilya Bisila, all of whom had grown in the service to become generals of the Nigerian Army. Timothy's involvement in the coup truncated his career at the rank of major. Timothy and his confederates were arrested by officers and men of the Nigerian Army and taken to prison where they were detained. They were initially detained at the Kirikiri Maximum Prison in Lagos, but later on, they were separated to avoid a regrouping. Timothy was separated and moved to Enugu Prison. They all waited for the decision of General Ironsi, who had emerged as the new head of state of Nigeria at the time. Every soldier that takes part in a coup knows that if caught alive, he will certainly face a court-martial and possibly the firing squad. But the new government of Ironsi took so much time in arriving at a decision on the fate of the soldiers and still did not arrive at one. During this period of waiting, General Ironsi was killed in a counter-coup that was staged by soldiers from the northern region of the country in retaliation for the pains of the first military coup. At this time, Timothy and co were still in different prisons. A young Christian military officer from the northern region, Lieutenant Colonel Yakubu Gowon, emerged as the new military head of state of Nigeria. Timothy and co were still in prison. Their fate was still unknown. Just like Ironsi, Gowon did not set up a court-martial to try the persons that killed Ironsi and Lieutenant Colonel Ademulegun, governor of the western region of Nigeria. The reason for this may not be far-fetched from the fact that Gowon was the direct beneficiary of the change in government. The killers of Ironsi were not even arrested. They continued in their military duties as though they did nothing prohibitive whatsoever. All was not well with the country, and the center was barely standing on one leg. In the midst of the discontent in the country, a pogrom ensued in the north, and several southerners, particularly Igbos, were killed in hundreds and thousands. Their son, Lieutenant Colonel Chukwuemeka Ademulegun Ojukwu, declared the independent state of Biafra for the Igbos, and a bitter war ensued between Nigeria and Biafra and raged on for 3 unbroken years with scores of lives lost. Ojukwu needed experienced hands to join him in the prosecution of the war, and thus took the decision to free the soldiers that were detained in prisons in the eastern region and midwestern region of the country. One of the persons freed and deployed to the war front was Major Timothy Onwatwegwu, who at the time was an inmate in Enugu prison. He left the prison precisely on 30th May 1967 in the wake of the Nigeria-Biafra War. Timothy died in 1970 at the twilight of the war in circumstances that remain controversial till date. One account, the account given by Major Ademulegun in his book Why We Struck, says that Timothy was tricked into a meeting with the 3rd Marine Commando Division and killed. The said commando was commanded by Olusegun Obasanjo. The alternative account of his death by Obasanjo is that during the process of surrender of Biafra to the commander of the 3rd Marine Commando by Philip Effiong, Timothy Onwatwegu attempted to ambush him, Obasanjo, near a place called Amichi. Having not succeeded in his mission, Timothy ran towards Cameroon, where he lost his life on the way. The exact story of his death is still not ascertainable. Despite the conflicting account of his death, what is however indisputable is the fact that Major Timothy Onwatwegu, one of the 7 majors that planned and executed the January 1966 military coup in Nigeria, is no more alive. This is the story of Major Timothy Onwatwegu, who was first a Nigerian soldier and later a Biafran soldier prior to his death. With his involvement in the coup, his career in the Nigerian Army, which was already on the progressive lane, took a nosedive and never rebounded. I thank you all for your time and for continually sharing my videos on multiple social media platforms for the viewing pleasure of your friends and loved ones. I thank you also for accompanying me always on this mission for the discovery, documentation, and preservation of the historical narratives of Nigeria and Africa at large. I am your friend and host, Ekemini Udim, wishing you the best of time in all you do.